Hello. March 12th, 2015 is a day that I will remember for as long as I live. It was the day that the world as a whole lost Terry Pratchett, one of my all-time favorite authors. Now, I've only ever read his Discworld series. I've yet to read his other series that he has out there. I've also read a couple of his standalone books, Good Omens. I've read The Long Earth, a collaboration with Stephen Baxter. And Terry Pratchett is a man whose loss has affected me. That entire day I was in a stupor. I was depressed. I'm still saddened by his loss. He was a great man. He still is a great man, because great men live forever in our hearts and minds. He's a man that I would have loved dearly to meet, because I've never met him, except in a way I have. I've met him every time I've opened one of his books, read the characters that he's written, and enjoyed the stories that he's crafted. He put himself into all of his books, and his life, his works, his accomplishments, even in a way his passing should be something that is not only remembered and revered, but also celebrated. Because, as far as I know, Mr. Pratchett was never a man to fear death. He wrote about death. Death is a character in the Discworld series, one of his most popular series out there. One with 45 plus books in it. And death as a character really was never something to be feared, but something merely there as part of living. So, Mr. Pratchett, this one's for you. Hello, and welcome to Chapter 23 of Book 1 of You Should Be Reading. Today, I'm going to talk about Terry Pratchett, an author who we lost recently, an author that I am a huge fan of. I have read quite a few of his books, and I would just like to touch on him and his works, at least the ones I have read. The biggest, of course, is the Discworld series, the series of books that deals with a rotating disc sitting on the back of 4 elephants, which are in turn standing on the back of a giant turtle swimming through space. It seems the most ridiculous of worlds to base a story in, and yet he made it work, not only as a fantasy setting, but also as an element of satire, to basically hold up our world to a mirror, that mirror being the Discworld, and showing us how absurd some of the things that we just take for granted as being part of our daily lives are. He did this in a very sly way. He snuck it in. Most recently, one of the most recent examples of his work being Raising Steam, the last of the Discworld novels that I believe will ever be published, was all about the dwarves and the introduction of the locomotive to the Discworld. it being a way to harness steam to power a locomotive. And the way it all fit together, the dwarves, there were these, they called them the deep delvers, the ones that were always covered head to toe in thick, heavy leathers, because they were the ones that always went down the deepest, where the flammable pockets were. They were the ones who risked their lives uh, back in the day for the dwarves in the mines. They've developed into like the spiritual leaders of the dwarves. And there is a parallel there with those dwarves to religious extremists in our world today, and how their beliefs, and he holds how their beliefs are really and truly absurd, because you have to have tolerance in this world. And he holds the mirror up of the disc world to our own world and shows us this in a way that really cuts through all of our preconceptions, because we're reading about it in a fantasy setting. And this I like about him. But not only that, but because the stories he tells in the Discworld are really quite amazing and enjoyable and funny reads. And they've introduced me to some of the most beloved characters that I've ever read. One in particular being, in his early one, Mort, where you find, this is the fourth, yes, the fourth Discworld novel. This book is, the first two and the one before this, Equal Rights, he's kind of finding his footing in the world. This one, he has a clear grasp of what he's doing with this world, I find. And in it, Death is the main character, sort of. Death comes to Mort and offers him a job as his apprentice. And Mort finds out that Death has a daughter. Adopted, of course. And there's a whole wonderful little back and forth and of Death kind of looking to take a bit of a vacation, because Mort's there to do it. Things happen. It's a thoroughly enjoyable read. There's a book shortly after this one where Death is, and he keeps popping up as a main character in the books. Not the only one. He has little series within his series, delving into characters. Then you have this one, Weird Sisters. This one deals with the Lancre Witches. And the Lancre Witches are, let's see, you have the Maiden, Mother, and Crone. The Maiden being Magrat Garlic, who is kind of a new age witch. She believes in crystals and stuff like that. Although with her they work. Then there's Granny Weatherwax. No, not Granny Weather. Sorry, Nanny Og. Nanny Og is the mother, because even though she's technically a grandmother, she's definitely fitting that particular role in their little coven. And then you have Granny Weatherwax. She's the crone, although they wouldn't say it to her face. These three witches in this particular novel basically tells the story of Macbeth, the actual Shakespearean play. It follows a lot of the same story beats. And not only does it follow those same story beats, it also ends up with an acting troupe putting on the play of Macbeth, which just goes even doubly absurd. And Death makes a cameo in it. He's actually playing himself in the stage play and forgets his lines. So, I mean, seriously, how could you not read this and not have a good laugh about it? Because it is amazing. The characters of the three witches are some of the most lifelike witches. They summon a demon, and instead of performing all of the hooju juju, they basically just toss a couple things into the wash, actually washing water they summon him from. They use detergent flakes, a wooden stirring spoon, and they summon a demon, because they just have that power. They don't need all the trappings of it. They don't need, like, real magic to them. is just getting things done. Definitely different from the wizards of the Discworld. And then the other one, the one that I really enjoy the most, because you may know from cop dramas, from other videos I should say, that I love my cop dramas, I love my procedurals, is you have the Guards series. The first book of the Discworld City Watch, or Night Watch as they're called in this. And it's just a handful of men working on the city's Night Watch. You have Captain Vimes, who's basically a parody of Dirty Harry. Then you have Sergeant Colin. Sergeant Colin is the epitome stereotype of the fat cop who likes to be everyone's friend, might be a little bit crooked, that sort of thing. Corporal Nobby Knobs, who actually has a certificate proclaiming him human, because there's a lot of people who think he's not. He is very short, very weaselly guy, and he's the type that will acquire items that just happen to be lying around. He doesn't see it as stealing, not exactly. Usually Colin and Knobs tend to work together. This particular one deals with a new inclusion in the Night Watch. A young man by the name of Carrot. He's called that because that's how he's shaped. Broad-shouldered, like a carrot. And he's about 6 feet tall, and he's a dwarf. Now, the reason being, he was a human baby, found and raised by dwarfs, so he believes himself to be a dwarf. In his mind, being a dwarf has nothing to do with height. So he identifies as a dwarf. And he, according to his parents, to be a man, especially since he's technically human, even though he considers himself a dwarf, to go to Ankh-Morpork, the biggest city, join the Night Watch, serve law and justice. And that's what he does. He goes there, joins the Night Watch, and because he's young and new and doesn't realize that, Ankh-Morpork is a fairly corrupt city. They have a thieves guild. They have an assassins guild. They have all of this. Basically, one of the first things Carrot does was march into the thieves guild and arrest the head of the thieves guild for being a thief. Yeah, imagine that. And it goes from there. And as things progress, the Night Watch becomes Vimes of the Night Watch. He becomes commander of the entire City Watch. He starts making changes, starts bringing in new people, starts changing the way crime is investigated. And Vimes really, he comes from a very film noir type detective, Dirty Harry, down on his luck type of a guy, to become a symbol of righteous justice in the world. And over the course of many, many novels, probably about 8 by now, centering around Commander Vimes in the City Watch, the character really progresses. And those aren't the only ones. He's also done a collaboration with Neil Gaiman, Good Omens. Death is also in this one. But so are the other 3 members of the Horsemen of the Apocalypse, because it's dealing with the Antichrist being born, and the angels and devils trying to get on it. It's a fantastic read, because you've got Gaiman, who's an amazing author, Pratchett, who's an amazing author, and they collaborate together. One of the most recent books I've read of his is a collaboration with Stephen Baxter, The Long Earth, dealing with plans that pop up in the middle of nowhere, released to the internet about a gadget, a box containing some wiring, a 3-way switch, and a potato as the power source. And that allows people to literally cross over into parallel dimensions, either going left or right, so to speak. And it deals with that type of sci-fi. If suddenly millions of parallel dimensions became accessible to the majority of mankind, how mankind would spread out away from themselves, how political things would develop because some people weren't capable of stepping, as they call it, to other worlds. I mean, in this one, there is a reincarnated Buddhist monk that is a machine because he was reincarnated as a vending machine, who then gets transferred into an AI body on an automatic blimp, that because he is technically the blimp, he can step into other worlds and take others with him. There's 2 other books in this series: The Long Earth, The Long War, which I have not read yet, and The Long Mars. Because in this book, the main character actually theorizes that what if there are other planets as well, not just on Earth, but on Mars and in outer space, and I assume it deals with that. So much books, and not only these ones, but his children's novels that he's written to young adults, starring Tiffany Aching, a young witch just coming into her own, and how she does things. And there's just so much that this man has done that I can't even imagine how the world is going to be without him. It saddens me that he's not going to be there, that I will not get to read any new books by him, any new books that he's written. I mean, this is a man that I have never met personally, and yet his death has affected me. Is it just because the world is a smaller place? I don't think so. But I think it's because his books have touched a part of me. His books have meant something to me. They've brought me joy. They've brought me wonder. And because he wrote them, is basically, this man has brought me joy, brought me wonder. And now he's gone. How could I not feel sad for him? For his family? But he wouldn't want me to dwell on that. I don't think so. I believe, as with many of his characters, you just keep on living and do the best you can. But I have to do something for him. So the other day, I sat down and put my fingers to the keys. And it's extremely cheesy because I kind of made it rhyme, but I wrote a little poem. So today I'm going to end on that poem. Please, if you like it, say so in the comments. If you don't, feel free to say so in the comments. It doesn't matter. This is just something that I had to do, a way to express myself and my feelings. So here it is. My world is round, a place so lost, it can't be found, despite the cost. And so I yearn, on knees I pray, my soul it burns, or so they say. There is a place that I can go, but just in case, I'll take it slow. No need to run down to my nook, that foreign sun waits in the book. His world is flat, a place of joy. It lies between his words so coy. On back of 4, on back of 1, revolved around by moon and sun. Central spire where the gods reside, around it land and sky and tide. And so I dive and take a risk, and I am told about the disc. And books and years go by a blur. I can only say, thank you, sir. Thank you, Sir Pratchett. May where you be now as much, if not better, than where you were. And one day, perhaps we'll meet again there. So, for this week, loyal viewers, remember, you should be reading Terry Pratchett.